Journalist Julian Assange heads to Australia following his release on bail by the British Justice after more than a decade of legal prosecution. The first 400 Kenyan police officers arrived in Port-au-Prince to lead a multinational force against criminal groups. The operation raises concerns among Haitians and human rights organizations. And in Kenya, anti-tax demonstrations continue amidst strong police repression. Thousands stormed the parliament building as lawmakers were voting on the controversial bill. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. On Tuesday, journalist Julian Assange heads to Australia following his release on bail by the British Justice after more than a decade of legal persecution for denouncing war crimes committed by the United States. The WikiLeaks founder agreed to plead guilty to a charge of espionage, which will validate the 5 years he served in British jails, fighting in court to avoid extradition to the U.S. Although U.S. prosecutors are recommending the Assange be sentenced to an additional 5 years in prison, he will not be forced to serve that time in Washington jails since he pled guilty. Assange was charged under the Espionage Act for obtaining and disclosing classified information that shed light on numerous war crimes and human rights abuses committed by U.S. troops during the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan. Julian Assange had been charged with 18 crimes of espionage and computer intrusion in the United States after the uncensorable WikiLeaks website exposed U.S. war crimes. From July to November 2010, Assange published on WikiLeaks confidential documents on Afghanistan's and Iraq's operations. He revealed 70,000 top-secret files on the international coalition in Afghanistan, 400,000 reports, and 250,000 diplomatic cables on the U.S. invasion of Iraq. All these documents reveal multiple war crimes committed by the United States and its allies in their invasions against Middle Eastern countries. Consequently, he was arrested on April 11, 2019, after being in asylum for several years in the diplomatic headquarters of Ecuador in London, until he was expelled from the embassy by the government of Lenin Moreno, being apprehended by the British security forces. Later, on May 23, 2019, the U.S. justice system, which had already charged him with computer hacking, indicted him on 17 other charges under the anti-espionage laws. Following the release of Australian journalist and WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, the WikiLeaks account on social media X issued. In this sense, it confirmed that Julian Assange is free after spending 1,901 days in prison, assuring that this is the result of a global campaign that included grassroots organizers, press freedom advocates, lawmakers, and leaders from across the political spectrum. In this way, the statement also added that there is an agreement with the U.S. Department of Justice that has not yet been formally concluded. The Post also noted that Assange paid to expose groundbreaking stories about the government corruption and human rights abuses, holding the powerful accountable for their actions. Finally, WikiLeaks thanks all those who have supported the cause of his freedom. In this regard, Julian Assange's lawyer and wife Stella wrote on her account on the social network X, "Julian is free. Words cannot express our immense gratitude to you, yes, you, who have mobilized for years and years to make this come true. Thank you, thank you." For his part, President of Venezuela Nicolás Maduro said, "On behalf of the people of Venezuela, we embrace and congratulate Julian Assange on his release. It is the triumph of the freedom and the struggle of humanity for the respect of human rights. Assange is an example of courage and bravery in the battle of truth. Justice will always prevail." Likewise, Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel said, "Assange is free. The long and cruel punishment imposed on him for his denunciations of imperial crimes will remain in the memory of the people as proof of how little his jailers believe in freedom of the press." In this context, Julian Assange's brother, Gabriel Shipton, celebrated his release and affirmed that the journalist's health has deteriorated during his imprisonment.
Has been deteriorating. He has a few different conditions health-wise, but I think now is a chance for him to rest and recuperate. And we've been told by the doctors who assessed him that he can recover from this. So I think that's the time for him now, is to rest and to recover. But we're just so, as Julian's family, we're overjoyed, we're overwhelmed that he is finally free. This has been an incredibly long campaign with many millions of people around the world advocating for Julian.
On the other hand, Shipton affirmed that international pressure was key to achieve the freedom of Julian Assange.
And it's taken years. It's taken constant lobbying around the world, constant protests. It's taken the media. The media has been integral in this. They've been covering this story more and more, which has put a lot more pressure on those who have been pursuing Julian. I've been working in Washington, working in Congress over there, advocating for Julian's release, for the past 3 or 4 years. This has been a global effort to get Julian Assange free, and credit to everybody out there. The Pope has advocated for Julian. The President Lula of Brazil, the Australian Prime Minister. This has been a global effort to free.
In Australia, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese welcomed the agreement reached between the US government and WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange.
I've been very clear, as both the Labor leader in opposition but also as Prime Minister, that regardless of the views that people have about Mr Assange's activities, the case has dragged on for too long. There's nothing to be gained by his continued incarceration, and we want him brought home to Australia.
Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates and more. All the stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. On Tuesday, the first 400 Kenyan police officers have arrived in Port-au-Prince to lead a multinational force against criminal groups. These officers are the first 1,000 policemen that Kenya will send to the Caribbean nation. The operation raises concerns among Haitians and human rights organizations who accuse the Kenyan police for past excessive use of force and carrying out extrajudicial executions. In this context, a document elaborated by the Organization of American States and signed in Washington by representatives of Kenya and Haiti cast doubt on the legal framework of the mission. Earlier, Kenyan President William Ruto called on the police officers to demonstrate their competence, integrity and professionalism amidst allegations of past human rights abuses by the officials.
Must be a firm statement of Kenya's capability and contribution to global peace and security, and a clear response to doubters and naysayers about your competence, integrity, and professionalism, as well as our nation's credentials.
On Monday, the White House released a statement announcing that Kenya will become a major U.S. ally outside NATO. The statement said President Joe Biden made the decision using the authority granted to him by the Constitution and U.S. law. The moves comes as more African countries are redefining their relationship with the West. The Pentagon is seeking new countries in Africa to host military contingents and expand cooperation after the forced withdrawal of its troops from Niger and Chad. The agency reported that some African nations have expressed frustration with the U.S. for enforcing issues such as democracy and human rights, which many see as hypocritical given Washington's close ties to autocratic leaders in the other regions. Thousands of protesters stormed Kenya's parliament on Tuesday after a bill to increase taxes in the African country was passed. According to local media, it is the first time in the country's history that protesters broke through the barriers and entered the parliament. During the day, the police opened fire on the demonstrators, leaving several bodies around the building. According to press sources, 8 people are reported dead, although the paramedics present at the scene indicate that a higher figure of at least 10 reported dead. In recent weeks, there have been massive protests throughout the country against the economic measures imposed by the Kenyan parliament and to demand the resignation of President William Ruto.
We are here today to protect the interests of our children, the current generation and the generation to come. We want the finance bill to be scrapped in totality.
Wakipitisha this finance bill, itakuwa maandamano kila siku until the time that the government is going to give us the accountability of our taxes. Sisi tunataka accountability ya tax yetu.
We are going on the street until the government will drop this finance bill. A government which cannot feed her people from hunger is a useless government. And we will not remain calm until the president stops this.
Meanwhile, Kenyan media reported that the sister of former U.S. President Barack Obama was tear-gassed by the national police during protests against measures passed by the parliament. Kenyan British activist Auma Obama said she found it difficult to see after the attack by security agencies. In Palestine, Israeli strikes killed at least 16 people across the Gaza Strip during attacks that included the bombing of 2 United Nations shelters. In this context, the Wafa news agency reported that 5 Palestinian citizens, including 3 children, were slaughtered when an Israeli occupation aircraft bombed a house in Al-Maghazi refugee camp overnight on Monday. Several injured were transferred to a hospital in the city of Deir al-Balah. Meanwhile, at the crack of this Tuesday, 11 other people were killed in attacks on 2 UNRWA refugee schools in the Gaza City. After 263 days of genocidal war, 37,622 people have been murdered by Israel, most of them children and women, while over 86,000 have been wounded. Palestinian women, men and children gathered in southern Gaza seeking to obtain food amid the genocide they have been facing for 8 months. Hundreds of people gathered in front of a charity warehouse in the city of Khan Yunis to fill their stew pots so they could eat. Palestinians are facing widespread hunger as Israel has largely cut off the flow of food, medicine and other supplies. In this regard, United Nations agencies said that over 1 million people in Gaza could experience the highest level of famine by this middle of this coming July.
Conditions are difficult. There is no help or anything. Thank God, in Rafah we used to help people, but here in Khan Yunis, we were displaced from Rafah to Khan Yunis and we found nothing but charity. We come here every day to eat from a charity organization.
Economic conditions are very, very difficult and we suffer from extreme poverty and hunger. Prices are very high and some products are not available. Children here suffer from acute malnutrition.
Amid the escalating crisis and uncertainty over ceasefire negotiations in Gaza, the United Nations Security Council will resume discussions on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The session will address the humanitarian situation after Israel launched a ground offensive in Rafah a month ago, causing the forced displacement of over 1 million Palestinians in a few days. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres stated recently that further military escalation will only bring suffering and devastation to the territory. So far, and after the draft presented to stop the hostilities, the Zionist government of Israel maintains its offensive against the Gaza Strip after more than 9 months of conflict. In Israel on Monday, hundreds of demonstrators protested near the residence of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The mobilizations demanded the end of the far-right government as well as a ceasefire agreement with the Palestinian resistance that would achieve the release of Israeli hostages from the Gaza Strip. In this sense, relatives of the hostages and other demonstrators reiterated their call for Tel Aviv to take responsibility for the death of dozens of hostages in Gaza. Israel's Supreme Court ruled unanimously on Tuesday that the army must be conscripting ultra-Orthodox men for military service, a move that could bring about the end of Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition government. In this regard, the court ruled that in the absence of a law distinguishing between Jewish seminary students and other conscripts, Israel's compulsory military service system applies to the ultra-Orthodox as to any other citizen. This measure puts an end to the benefit historically held by males from that religious group. The ultra-Orthodox party's key partners in Netanyahu's coalition government oppose any change to the current system, so the ruling could generate collapse within the far-right government. We have a final short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with teleSUR. Final short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. In Argentina, the Union Front of the National Universities began a 72-hour protest on Tuesday to demand an improvement in salaries and to denounce the austerity policy of the government of Javier Milei. In this context, educators reject the lack of response from the executive and a loss of more than 40% of purchasing power. Precisely, a statement pointed out that no public university is possible without decent salaries and with 60% of teachers living below the poverty line. It also adds that the conflict at the national university is still open due to the government's decision to increase only 10% of the budget, which corresponds to operating expenses, and freeze the remaining 90%, which includes the workers' salaries. Also in Argentina, hundreds of people protested following the disappearance of a 5-year-old boy who was last seen in a rural village in the province of Corrientes. The child, Loan Danilo Peña, went missing 12 days ago from the town 9 de Julio. Authorities announced that they would ask the Paraguayan police for help due to suspicions that the minor could have been kidnapped by a human trafficking ring. So far, 6 people have been detained as the investigation continues. The case that has caused uproar in the population comes amidst Javier Milei's actions to dismantle public policies for the prevention of human trafficking.
I don't trust the police in Corrientes, or any other, neither here nor anywhere else. They did their job badly. They needed to close the town once and for all since the disappearance became known. And they didn't close anything.
In Brazil, the government will send 7 planes to fight the fires that took place in the region of the Pantanal. The country's high command also declared the emergency state for the cities of the state of Mato Grosso do Sul that were affected by the fires, result of the climate change and the low rainfall that left 576,000 hectares burned. The decree issued by Governor Eduardo Riedel declaring the emergency situation also pays special attention to the impacts of the fire on agriculture in the Pantanal, which represents both economic and environmental losses for Brazil in close relation to vegetation, land, wildlife, tangible property, and safety of human lives. Through a communique, authorities of Brazil warned about the possibility of new floods in the southern territories. According to the authorities, the alert was decreed taking into account that the waters of the Guaíba River have risen in the last 24 hours. One of the main cities on alert is the city of Porto Alegre in the state of Rio Grande do Sul, which has not yet recovered from the rains that affected the region in April and May and left 117 people dead and 37 missing. Group D of the 2024 Copa America kicked off on Monday with an underwhelming performance by one of the historic teams of the international football. In this way, Brazil could not get more than 1 point in their opening match after a 0-0 draw with Costa Rica, which has in its recent history the achievement of having defeated great teams on big competitions, as it happened in the World Cup of Brazil 2014, where it reached the quarterfinals and exited the tournament undefeated. For its part, Brazil, despite getting off an unaccepted start, is still the favorite in its group together with Colombia, which won its opening game against Paraguay with a score of 2-0. On Tuesday, the second phase of the group stage games in the Copa America begins where the current champion Argentina will face its regional rival Chile in the city of New York. It is worth mentioning that Chile is looking for their first victory that will allow them to continue dreaming about the next round, while the Argentine squad looks to maintain their good streak and qualify with a win to the quarterfinals, getting Chile out of the way. Now let's talk about the UEFA Euro 2024 Championship being played in Germany, because on Tuesday the teams of France, England and the Netherlands that share 4 points in their group will play their third match of the qualifying phase, and a victory would put them in the next stage. For the part, France will face Poland, forced to win in order to aspire to be a third-place finisher. For France, Kylian Mbappé returns to the starting lineup after suffering a broken nose in the opening match. The European Championship already has 5 countries that will play in the round of 16 phase, some with their 3 games played and others before the end of the group phase. This way, in the next round, there are games already set between Switzerland and Italy, while the Germans, Spanish and Portuguese are waiting for their rival that will come out of the upcoming matches. It should be noted that the next round will start on Saturday, and so far the disappointment of the event has been Croatia, who go winless, reaching only 2 draws. Croatia's last game could be the last one for Luka Modric, who has played 5 UEFA Euro Cup, reaching the quarterfinals in 2008. We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net, and join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram and TikTok as well. For Telesur English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.